Hey, what is going on guys? RvzStealth here, and in today's video, we're going to be taking a look at the new strong and weak picks for patch 8.11. So this patch is a pretty big one. This is going to be the 80 carry item rework patch, so the meta should shift quite a bit down in the bot lane for patch 8.11. So we're going to start off by taking a look at direct changes to champions. After that, we'll head into item changes. Lastly, we'll take a look at rune changes as well as some other miscellaneous changes. So the first change here is to Anivia. Anivia's Q is getting a buff, her AP ratio is getting increased, and the cooldown is getting decreased. Now with the meta kind of changing recently, Anivia did fall out of being a top tier mid lane pick because she's just not the greatest in the mid lane. With this change here, I don't really think that's going to change how she fits into the meta. She's still not going to be the greatest pick in my opinion for next patch, just because she doesn't have the ability to pressure super hard in the early game, and she does need to scale up, which just isn't the best for this meta. So Graves is getting some much needed nerfs for next patch. His base AD is getting lowered, his ultimate's cooldown is getting increased, so I still think he is going to be a strong jungler in next patch. At the very most, this would move him from S tier down to like S minus tier. I really don't think this is really going to change how strong Graves is in next patch, but I still think he's going to be one of the stronger junglers just because he does fit very well into the meta. So probably the change I'm most excited for patch 8.11 is actually a change to Kha'Zix. Kha'Zix has been one of the most annoying and one of the just most frustrating junglers to play against in solo queue, because if he gets ahead with his ultimate, he's just going to go into your jungle. You're not going to know where he is, and he's just going to keep killing you. And the fact that he can kill you 100 to 0 from just being stealth in bushes was very, very frustrating. So they're just going ahead and they're completely removing that from his ultimate. They're now changing it to where instead of giving you perma stealth in bushes, they're changing his evolved ultimate to where it's now gonna give you one more charge. So when you evolve it, it goes from 2 charges up to 3 charges, and then it's also gonna give you 2 seconds of stealth duration per charge. So I think that this change is definitely fair. I think that this change is gonna be just a lot more healthier for the game. It's gonna make Kha'Zix a little bit weaker in my opinion, because if he does get ahead now, he's not just gonna be able to go into your jungle and be perma stealth. So this will make Kha'Zix weaker in my opinion for 8.11, but I think it's definitely a change that was needed due to the fact that it just wasn't a healthy playstyle to play against a champion that could just perma invis in your jungle. So Rakan is getting a nerf in next patch to his survivability. His heal from his Q is getting lowered, and then his shield strength from his E is also getting lowered. Now they're not getting lowered by too much, and I don't think that this is really gonna bring Rakan down in power very much at all. Rakan is one of the strongest engaged supports. You don't really play Rakan for his shield strength or for his healing in the laning phase. This will make his laning phase a little bit weaker, but it's not gonna take away from what Rakan is as a champion. It doesn't take away from his main strengths and the main reasons to why you pick the champion. So the champion getting the biggest changes directly to them in 8.11 is Taliyah, and I'm going to go over what I think are the most important changes here. I'll have them all up on screen, but I'm not going to go over every single one. So the most important changes in my opinion are to her Q. They're removing the AoE damage from her Q completely. They're changing it though to where it's now going to deal the full amount of damage for every single rock to minions. So it's still going to deal less damage to champions after you get the first rock on the opponent, but to minions it is going to deal the full damage. So I'm not too sure how this is really going to affect her ability to shove in the laning phase, but if removing the AoE damage from her Q does not allow her to shove and get priority in the early game, then there's just no point in picking Taliyah over someone like Twisted Fate or Aurelion Sol if you're looking for a strong shove and roam mid lane champion. I think that's all it's really going to come down to. All of the other changes are pretty negligible. It's really just going to come down to this change to her Q here and how it's going to affect her ability to perform in the early game. If she is still able to get priority in lane and she is able to shove even with these Q changes, then I think that she will actually be stronger for next patch, because her passive is getting changed to where she's now going to gain 40% movement speed in the earlier ranks instead of 20%, so that's really beneficial. She is going to be able to roam quicker in next patch, but it's really just going to depend if she's even able to roam due to the fact that she might not be able to get priority like she used to. So Viktor's getting a few buffs as well for next patch. His Q's damage is being increased, not at rank 1 at all though. It's not getting increased at all at rank 1. It's getting increased by 10 at rank 2, 20 at rank 3, and then it goes up to 40 at rank 5, but you don't max out Q first on Viktor, so this really isn't going to help him too much for next patch, unless you do end up putting a few points into Q now in the early game because of this change. Then it's just going to be a pretty negligible change to Viktor. His ultimate is also getting changed to where his AP ratio is getting increased by 10%, so in this patch, he's sitting at a 45% win rate for solo queue, which is one of the lowest for any mid lane champions other than Azir and Ryze right now. So he honestly is going to need more of a buff to really start to see some play in solo queue, and these changes are really not going to make him that much better for 8.11. So we do have a nerf to Xin Zhao, so both Graves and Xin Zhao are both getting targeted for 8.11 because they are two of the strongest junglers for 8.10. His AD per level is getting lowered from 3.3 down to 3, and then his E slow is getting lowered from 50% down to 30%. This does not take away anything from Xin Zhao's ability to duel in the early game. It doesn't take away from his core strengths right now in this patch and to why he's a strong pick. So overall, Xin Zhao should still very much be S tier for 8.11. So now we're going to move on to taking a look at some of the AD carry changes for next patch. Now I think that what I'm going to do here is, because I already made a separate video where I went pretty in depth on the AD carry changes, I'm not going to go over every single AD carry change in this video. I'm going to link that video if you want to watch it in the top right hand corner of the screen here. But if you just want like a TLDR on the AD carry item changes and who's going to be good for next patch, then you can just continue watching this video. So for every single AD carry in 8.11, their base stats are getting changed. Their base AD is getting lowered, their AD per level is getting increased, their armor is getting lowered, their HP is getting increased by a little bit, their HP per level is getting increased by a little bit, and their HP regen is getting lowered. So basically what this means here is that AD carries are now going to be weaker in the early game. And then for the item changes for AD carries, a TLDR on how they are going to affect AD carries for next patch is crit AD carries are now going to take longer to spike. They're going to be weaker in the early game, and this means that indirectly it's going to make early game AD carries stronger. So picks like Misfortune, Draven, and Lucian I assume are going to be very good for next patch because they're going to be able to punish those AD carries a lot more in the early game, because champions like MF, Draven, and Lucian, they can all spike off of one item, and because crit AD carries need at least 2 to 3 items to really start to deal some damage, early game AD carries are going to be very strong in my opinion for next patch. So for some other item changes, Banner of Command is getting changed to where it's no longer gonna give the minion that you put it on immunity to magic damage. They're changing it to where it's gonna give your minion 70% damage reduction from champions. So what this means here is against AD compositions, this would be a buff to Banner of Command, but against AP compositions, this would be a little bit more of a nerf because AP champions will now be able to damage the banner minions. The item is also no longer going to give 10% CDR, so I think that overall this is going to be a nerf to Banner because the main reason to why you'd pick it up is to put it into a side lane against an AP champion who couldn't deal any damage to it, and the fact that AP champions are now going to be able to deal damage to it, I just don't think it's going to be as effective of an item for next patch. And then Runic Echoes is just getting pretty much straight up buffed for 8.11. The AP on the item is getting increased from 60 up to 80. Now that's actually a pretty substantial buff there. The build path on the item is also getting changed up a little bit, so I think that overall this is a nice buff here to AP jungle champions, and overall it's just going to make them much stronger for 8.11. And the final change for next patch is a change to Shurelyas, to where the total cost is getting increased by 150. It's now going to give you 100% base mana regen. Its unique passive, the movement speed, is getting lowered from 8% down to 5%, and then the unique active, the cooldown on it, is being increased from 60 seconds up to 90 seconds. I think that this item is still going to be a great choice for 8.11 on a lot of different champions, even though it is getting slightly nerfed in my opinion, because they did add in the base mana regen there on the item. This is actually going to be pretty nice for a few different mid lane picks, like Aurelion Sol is someone who was running this item, and the base mana regen there for a champion like Sol or Malzahar as well is going to be really nice. So I think that this item is still going to be great, even though it did get a little bit of a nerf. And then if we take a look at some changes to runes now for next patch, Fleet Footwork is getting nerfed, so this is going to end up being an indirect nerf to most AD carry champions right now that are running Fleet Footwork. The movement speed on it is getting decreased, the healing from minions on it is also getting decreased, and then the heal that you get when you do end up getting crit strike. In previous patches, the more crit you got, the more heal that you would get from Fleet Footwork, but that is now getting completely removed for next patch. A new rune that's getting introduced for next patch, a new keystone rune, is Hail of Blades. Now I did make a separate video on this one where I went into detail about the rune, and I also talked about which champions would be good with it, so I will link that in the top right hand corner of the screen here. But basically it's a new rune that's going to give you extra attack speed for the first 3 attacks against champions. So this is going to be a rune that's pretty good on champions that benefit from just a quick burst of damage or a quick burst of attack speed. So picks like Twitch, I can see this being pretty good on. Tom Kench is another one that this could theoretically be pretty good on in order to stack up his passive. It could also be good on Darius as well to stack up his passive faster. I think that overall it's going to be a pretty niche rune. We're not going to see a ton on a lot of champions, but like any new thing getting added to the game, we will have to wait until this does hit live to really know exactly how strong it actually is. And then 2 non-keystone runes getting introduced for next patch. The first one here is Ultimate Hunter. Now this one is going to be placed in the domination tree in the 3rd non-keystone row. And what it's going to do is it's basically the same as Ultimate Hat, but it's a little bit different. So it's going to give your ultimate 5% reduced cooldown, and it's going to give yourself an additional 2% cooldown on your ultimate per bounty hunter stack. For most champions right now, they're either taking the healing one in that tree or the movement speed one, so I'm not too sure if that's really going to change in next patch. I think that for certain champions that are really ultimate dependent, like a Nocturne for example, would end up switching over to this rune, but I think that for most champions, they're probably not going to want to take this one over the healing or the movement speed. And then lastly here, Nimbus Cloak is the other rune getting introduced, and what it's going to do is it's going to give you extra movement speed after you use your ultimate for 2.5 seconds. So it's going to give you 100 movement speed for 2.5 seconds, which is actually pretty insane on certain champions that do rely on getting into a fight and then getting out quickly. I think this could actually be a really nice rune here. So someone like Hecarim, for example, who's gonna use his E and ult in, that extra movement speed that you get there on Hecarim is gonna be really beneficial because it's just gonna add to his damage, and it's also gonna add to him just being able to get into a fight, do his damage, and then get right out. Now it is gonna have a 60-second cooldown, so this isn't something that you would be able to spam on champions that do have a very short cooldown ultimate, like an Udyr or an Elise or a Jace, so it's not going to be abusable by those champions because of the cooldown. So I think that overall this is going to be a niche rune because for most jungle picks that are running sorcery right now as their secondary, I think they're still going to be taking celerity and water walking because those are very strong runes right now, and for most junglers, Nimbus Cloak just isn't going to be the best on them. I think that for some mid lane champions, we could see this being a pretty good rune on them. I think that Kennen could actually be pretty good with this just because him using his ultimate in a team fight and gaining that movement speed would be very pretty beneficial to him, but for most picks, I think that they're not really going to want to run this over other options. So that is going to be all for this video, guys. This is what we're looking at heading into patch 8.11. Definitely keep an eye out on the bot lane for next patch. That is probably the role that is going to change the most, and we are going to see a shift in the meta for the bot lane for next patch. With that being said though, guys, if you did enjoy the video, then be sure to leave a like and subscribe if you have yet to already. So thanks for watching, have an awesome day, and I will see you in my next video.